I got a new chair. Okay, so it's been a while, so let's do a fun one. Heavenly Candy, which is basically my ideal crazy ass fighting game. It's definitely a 3D fighter, but it's more of those arena fighters. Something more like Power Stone, or more specifically Dissidia. See, I like fighting games very much. One-on-one, characters fighting each other, having their own special abilities and whatnot. But I don't really like the way they control, because considering that those control schemes are made out of a joystick and a couple of buttons, and even though most fighting games are on controllers now, they don't adapt to a controller. Anyway, I have difficulties doing the inputs. Like, I can maybe do quarter turns, but that's about it. So I haven't really been able to fully explore those games because they're just so thumb-hurty. That's why I like Injustice, because it's just downside, no diagonals, stuff like that. Now, this stylistic choice is very much in your face, over the top, super fun, crazy, just style out the wazoo type deal. The announcer guy, he's clearly on cocaine or something, because he's always having fun, and instead of saying ready fight, every round is let's get funky, or 3, 2, 1, let's get funky or something. And then like the jazz fusion soundtrack will start playing, maybe funk, and then the actual fights will happen. And sometimes the announcer will say some commentary based off the characters, such as in a mirror match, he'll say like fight yourself, or if the characters are hot, sex yourself, something like that. You know, something that Skullgirls does, it all depends on your skill, stuff like that. Now, the playable characters themselves, basically I wanted them to be as over the top as possible, and they're very, very crazy, and they're basically all inspired by either internet jokes, or they're drawn from the deepest recesses of like 4chan or something. I mean, they're not memes, but they're definitely, they don't care. Like, this game gives no Fs. I don't think I can say that on YouTube anymore. So, such characters include Voltaire, the world's gayest vampire. He basically, like, wears this suit, and he's, like, super nice. I mean, like, he's stylized like a classic vampire Dracula, except, you know, he's cleaner, he's, like, clean-shaven, has, like, a suit, fights with a sword, turns into bats. But, like, everything he says, even though he's got a really deep voice, he is extremely gay. In fact, the announcer will say he loves sucking blood almost as much as he loves. You can figure it out. And he'll be paired off, I'll explain the pairings later, with this girl who's in a school uniform, and she's packing a lot of guns. And she's constantly talking about how she has to destroy the government. And she's basically a spoof of young adult novels. Because the government's always the bad guy for some reason. Okay, on the down low, she might be a school shooter reference. At the time that I was coming up with this game, there was like a lot of those. And they're always students for some reason. It's kind of weird. Where do these kids get all these guns? And then there's this one guy. He very much looks like Lucifer from El Shaddai. Do you remember that game? It was weird. And so he's fashionable and he's really skinny, and he's always on his cell phone. In fact, that's his primary means of it. Like, he'll never not talk on his cell phone. And his primary means of attack is he'll summon these weird bat creatures, or, well, not bats, because we already have the vampire for that. He'll summon these, like, sentient, tiny demon creatures that will, like, fly around, and all of his different attacks are just different variations of that projectile. But of course he'll like never break his strut. And he'll just like toss them out with his other hand while he's like speaking. There's one guy whose entire strategy is he sets himself on fire and then just attacks the enemy. Okay, there's this one guy who has these tentacles coming out of his back, and he uses them to, kind of like Doc Ock or something. And he's definitely seen enough hentai to know where that's going. With this fighting game, I wanted not only to stress your abilities, but when you're fighting your opponent, how to take advantage of their abilities. So when you're fighting this tentacle guy, you can't block him, because if he touches you, you kind of lose, so you have to dodge, or you have to attack his tentacles before they get to you. There's one character who his entire body is basically broken because he has this huge sword that like physically hurts him to use, but he's got like this kind of like soul thing that can jump out and like stun the opponent so that you can keep them busy enough for you to swing the sword and do the big damage on them. There's this one guy whose entire strategy is counter dick punches. See, he can't actually attack. All he does is counter stances. And so his entire strategy is luring the enemy into attacking him while he's in a stance so that he'll turn it around and then punch them in the dick. Like one where he'll like grab his legs, spread them, dick punch, or he'll just knock them in the air, dick, 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 dick punch. Of course, when he fights female opponents, he'll be like, he won't know what to do. So he'll do something else to damage them. I don't know. Now, the reason why it's called Heavenly Candy is I think one of the characters will say something like, when we die, our deaths will be sweet, will be like candy for heaven or something like that. So that's why they're called Heavenly Candy. And the story is they're basically all summoned for a big tournament. Every matchup in every location has its own setup. In fact, the story mode itself is the tournament bracket. So when you start a campaign, or when you start the story mode, you're given the tournament bracket, and then you go in and play every match. And you get to pick who you play as. In every fight, it takes place in a new location. Those two characters will meet, they'll have their conversation, and then they'll battle. Because, like, you know, in fighting games, there's always that pre-meeting fight, but those are always really flimsy. So I'm thinking, like, whole cutscenes. But, of course, that'd be a kind of a pain in the ass to program, because that's so many different variations. Although I think nowadays, it'd be kind of easy to do. I think we have the technology to do that, since that's the whole story. So anyway, you're playing through this tournament bracket, and in every fight, you'll fight it, and if the character you're playing as wins, they'll move on, or if the other character wins, they'll move on. And so basically, depending on whether you win or lose all these fights, different characters move on in the story, and then all the different fights will change, and so different characters will meet in the similar places and similar tournament things. And basically this story changes depending on how well you play. At the end, the finals, they'll be like the last two characters, you pick who wins, and that's how you get that ending. And so there's replay value, because then you can go back, pick a different character, and then play through the tournament and make sure that that character wins. So it's basically a big tournament mode that you have to play every time, so you can see every character and see every matchup. It's a real system that players can, if they have the time, they can just really appreciate by just gaming it or metagaming things. Sort of like Shadow Mordor's Nemesis system, except you have complete control over it, because you're the one actually fighting as everybody. So there'd be instances where if Fireball guy beats Counter Dick Puncher over here, while Schoolgirl Shooty is able to beat the Vampire, Schoolgirl and Fireball fight each other in the next round. But if the Vampire wins, then Fireball and the Vampire will fight in that place, and then the cutscene will be completely different. And so thus the story will be different, because we'll get to see how those characters interact with each other. Of course, there's also free battle, and there'll probably be some offline CPU rush campaign mode where you get to apply stats or whatever. I really like those systems. It's what like Injustice 2 does, or basically all of Dissidia. Really gives more long-term value. Like a Persona 4's Golden Arena is great because it, just gives you context to the fighting. Because as we learned with Street Fighter V, unless you want to play online, there's kind of no context after you beat arcade mode. So yeah, that's Heavenly Candy. It's a game I've always wanted. It's probably in bad taste. It's super over the top, super flashy. All the characters are really weird. And it's like indefinitely quotable. Huh.
Arrivederci.